start tonight by congratulating the 118th Congress and the new Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy. And 2 years ago, COVID had shut down, our businesses were closed, our schools were robbed of so much, and today, COVID no longer controls our lives. And 2 years ago, democracy faced its greatest threat since the Civil War, and today, though bruised, our democracy remains unbowed and unbroken. I think the people...
And happy Sunday, and welcome to The Deal. It is Sunday, February 12th, 2023, Super Bowl Sunday. I'm your host, Ed Clark, along with Val Atkinson, and we're so happy to be in here. You know, a lot of places it's rainy or cold or whatever. It's a good day for some chili and some wings and watch the Super Bowl, which is going to drag on for hours and hours and hours. And Rihanna's going to perform at halftime, so there's a lot for you to do this afternoon. And Americans sit around. Val, you know, I think Super Bowl Sunday is like another holiday for not just Black folks, but all Americans. We know we cook our favorite stuff and we sit around and watch the game or whatever. But this Super Bowl, the reason why Black was on my mind, because two Black quarterbacks are going to be starting in the Super Bowl, and we're going to talk about that later in the show. But what we saw in the lead-in, Val, was in the clips was State of the Union. The President of the United States, Joe Biden, gave the address, the annual address that's required in Article 2, Section 3, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution, that says that the president needs to periodically give Congress information about the State of the Union. So let's start there. But before that, hold on. Hey, Val.
Hello.
You know what threw me off and why I started talking is because you got on that ugly sweatshirt again, but that's fine. But hey, Val, I said a mouthful to start things out, but let's talk about the State of the Union. Joe Biden delivers the State of the Union address. So let's go back, because we always talk about history here, this whole history of the State of the Union. What's up with that? You know, why did Joe Biden even have to stand up there in the first place?
Well, I think you laid it out real clearly, Ed, when you talk about Article 2, Section 1, Clause 3, or Section 3, Clause 1, that really requires the executive to make a report regarding the state of the union. But it didn't say you had to get up and announce it or even call a joint section of the Congress. Definitely didn't say it had to be on TV. But it has grown and morphed into what it is now, starting back with Woodrow Wilson and some other people. And it's gotten to the point now, it's an expectation. People look forward to it, people plan on it, and it gets out of control sometimes, starting with Barack Obama and now with Joe Biden. It is almost like some of the types of ceremonies that you see in other countries. Sometimes it doesn't have the calmness of what we are used to seeing here in the United States.
Well, Val, because you said that, let's look at the clip. This is clips from around the world of people behaving badly when the head of state is getting up to speak. Let's take a look at it.
29-member House, but the People's Democratic Law members quickly interrupted the reading of the letter. A heated argument ensued.
Business as Serb areas is a threat to Kosovo's independence, amid Cape water bottles being hurled outside.
So, Val, some people behave very badly in other places.
Unbelievable.
Throwing eggs, throwing chairs, outright fighting each other in their parliament or place of seat of government. And I don't want it to come to that. And so one of the things we've seen is that gradual escalation since Barack Obama of people not having any decorum at all. And this time it was Marjorie Taylor Greene in her white fur that had no decorum, and she was yelling and constantly calling Joe Biden a liar, interrupting, and those kind of things. Now, you can make a joke about it, a little bit funny about how silly she sounds and looks in what she was doing. But on a serious tip, we talked about this off camera and off mic yesterday about how Joe Biden responded. Real quick before we delve into it, let's look at this clip of Joe Biden trying to respond to the hecklers when they were talking about Social Security, because I want you to tell me what you told me yesterday about how you think he should have handled it.
Instead of making the wealthy pay their fair share, some Republicans want Medicare and Social Security to sunset. I'm not saying it's a majority. Let me give you, anybody who doubts it, contact my office. I'll give you a copy. I'll give you a copy of the proposal. That means Congress doesn't vote. Well, I'm glad to see you. No, I tell you, I enjoy conversion. It means if Congress doesn't keep.
So clearly, Joe Biden is not the type of guy who kind of sits back and, he will respond to people. And he did that during the address. What's your take on how he responded and if he should have in a manner that he did?
Well, personally, I do not feel that he should have responded as he did. I think the bar was set. The example was given by Barack Obama when he was called a liar. He stopped, he looked, he paused, and then he continued to speak. Because as the purveyor of the State of the Union message, President of the United States of America, you're in charge. You have the floor. You can't really give up part of that floor to a heckler. And the last thing you could do or should be doing is getting into some kind of dialogue. The State of the Union is a monologue among all monologues. It's not a dialogue. You can't allow people to do that. And part of that's part of Joe Biden's MO, Ed, because if you watch some of his press conferences, the press conference will be over, he'll be leaving the room, and some anonymous reporter will just yell, "Hello, Mr. President, what did you have for breakfast this morning?" Or they'll ask him, "When's the last time you talked to President Xi about nuclear proliferation?" Whatever the question, it doesn't matter. He feels it's his obligation to stop and come back and answer that question. It's a part of his makeup. But the State of the Union is not the place to be creating a dialogue and coming back and asking questions. I therefore think he should have followed Barack Obama, paused for a second, looked, and continued his address. That would have been the big ignore, I call it. The big way to ignore.
Yeah, I was struck by that. I was waiting for him to call somebody a mofo or something, because he has cussed people before, and he is not afraid to use his blue collar upbringing in the way. Because I remember him challenging Donald Trump to go out back and duke it out. So I want to remind you, you're spending time on the deal with Ed Clark and Val Atkinson. It is Sunday, February 12th, Super Bowl Sunday. We're talking about the State of the Union address. One last thing, Val, before we wrap this up. A lot of things about the State of the Union are promising what you're going to do or what you think should be done. And Joe Biden got down into, I think, the weeds a little bit, because he started talking about resort fees and all kind of other stuff that, maybe the government does have a role in doing, but generally State of the Union is like these really high issues like Social Security, Obamacare, stuff like that. Overall, though, how would you grade the address itself? Had he not been heckled, had he been able to just say what he said, content-wise, how do you grade that?
If he had not been heckled and based on the accumulation of the areas that he wanted to touch on, I'd give him an A, because he touched on everything that needs to be touched on, except my favorite, which we will get into the latter part of the show, that is race and culture. But at any rate, everything else he touched on it. He touched on it well. He touted his accomplishments, things that his administration has done, talked about what they're going to do in the future. So, and he compared his administration with the last administration. He drew those lines of comparisons. And so for that, I give him an A.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I agree with you there. I thought he did well in terms, because he had something to talk about, right?
Right.
All the State of the Unions under the last guy, under 45, were pretty down and dour, and kind of just, again, his MO of poking fun at people, or either saying how bad things were. So we'll put a pin in the State of the Union, and it's a pun that leads into our next subject about the balloon, Val. We put a pin in the balloon. See that? So here is from the CBC in Canada, old Canada. Canada asked the United States to participate in the shoot down of a balloon the other day. This is a different balloon, not the balloon that we shot down before. So this is from the CBC in Canada.
Barely a week after a Chinese balloon was spotted and shot down by fighter jets in U.S. airspace, revelations that American forces saw something else, small and high up in the sky over Alaska.
The object was flying at an altitude of 40,000 feet and posed a reasonable threat to the safety of civilian flight.
Believed to be unmanned and unguided, it was smaller than the balloon, about the size of a small car. Some 12 hours after detection, F-22 fighter jets scrambled to shoot it down Friday over Alaska's North Shore, very close to the Canadian border. The object was floating toward the northeast, and had it continued, could have entered Canadian airspace over the Beaufort Sea. It was brought down onto sea ice, where a U.S. military team is investigating. White House officials say they don't know if this, too, might have been a spy balloon or if Beijing was behind it.
I know of no plans to reach out to the Chinese specifically on this. I want to stress again, we don't know what entity owns this object. There's no.
So, Val, the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, asked NORAD in the North American Defense to shoot down another object. Here's the big question on this. The last I checked, it was February 12th, 2023. And there's all kind of satellites in the air. There's all kind of, electronic surveillance. There's all kind of spying going on around the world. And balloons are from like the 1700s. And they used balloons to spy in the Civil War. And what's going on with these balloons, Val?
Well, they can be masked. They can be confused with non-lethal, non-threatening types of apparatuses that are up there just flying. It could be a governmental agency that's doing this. It could be corporate. It could even be private. There are so many unknowns about that. But when you look at other objects that could be in the air, a lot of these categories are eliminated because there aren't a whole lot of private listening satellites and that kind of thing. And states don't have them. So, if you do a balloon, it could be anybody. I think that's one of the reasons they're doing that. But I listen to people like Malcolm Nance, and I know you've listened to him quite a bit as well, Ed. And he thinks that people ought to really read and become aware of what is really going on. That is, everybody's doing it. Come on, let's not be crazy. Let's not believe all of this rhetoric about they're spying on us and it's our territory and it's unfair and it's illegal and you're doing the same thing as you to them as you're talking to me. So the balloons are up there. It could have been something else. The last word I heard, Ed, there was a cylinder-shaped object flying around. You know, balloons are not normally that shaped, okay? So it could be something else. I think the biggest thing, and you mentioned the Civil War, you know, I got to always go back to that. The biggest motivator of what's going on here is the 75,000 troops that were brought up after the attack on Fort Sumter. Abraham Lincoln did that because he did not want to face the American public and them asking him, what are you going to do about them firing on our property like that? Same thing here. Fast forward to 2023. The question is, what are you going to do about that balloon flying around up there? So that's what motivates some of these chiefs of state to do things, to answer the question before it's asked. They know it's going to be asked, so they want to do these things so that the public and primarily the opposition doesn't get an advantage over this incident that just happened.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And Val, I clearly I didn't play any of the nonsense that the Republicans were talking about how horrible this was, and Joe Biden, I guess, wants China to spy, whatever their rationale is for not shooting it down immediately, especially that first balloon. But I also heard that now they're finding stuff in South America and everywhere else, and I suspect there's way more things out there than you'll ever know. And then back to the whole issue that we spy all the time. That's been a part of our history. And our most recent history with spying, Val, was one day spied on the Black Panthers and used that to kill American citizens. I suspect, Val, if we ever see the documentation from the King assassination, it'll reveal how much the CIA had infiltrated those organizations, and also Malcolm X assassination. And I bet there's ties to all those people that met an untimely demise that had to do with Americans spying on other Americans. So we don't have it's the pot calling the kettle black, right? Let's just leave it at that. Hey Val, you know what? It's time to take a break. And in the break, you know, it's Black History Month, right? So we've been trying to feature stories that you may not know. In the break, you're going to see a story about Robert Small. I just read a biography about him. Robert Small was the first Black congressman from South Carolina. And his claim to fame is he stole a Confederate boat and took people to freedom down in Beaufort, South Carolina. So stay right there. Watch this video about Robert Smalls for Black History Month, and then we'll be right back after this message.
Robert Smalls was a hero of both the Civil War and of Reconstruction. In 1874, he was elected to the United States House of Representatives from the state of South Carolina. Just 12 years before, he staged one of the boldest and most imaginative escapes in the history of slavery. Its daring and its timing were unbelievable. Robert Smalls was a 23-year-old slave pressed into service for the Confederacy aboard a ship called the Planter. For nearly a year, Smalls quietly observed the movements of the ship and its crew. Just before dawn, on May 13, 1862, Smalls took his chance. While the ship's officers slept ashore, Smalls and his fellow enslaved crew members pulled up anchor and eased the Planter into Charleston Harbor.
The plan was that he and the other enslaved members would meet their family members and take off and sail to Union territory. He knew that there would be danger ahead because he had to pass through 4 Confederate checkpoints. He dressed up like the captain. He even walked like the captain so that it looked like nothing was wrong.
Smalls slipped past the first 3 checkpoints undetected. The most dangerous checkpoint remained, Fort Sumter. As dawn broke, the crew urged Smalls to take a wide berth, but Smalls knew that changing course could arouse suspicion. Smalls gave the signal. A few seconds later, the signal came back. Pass on by. As the ship approached Union territory, Smalls replaced the palmetto and rebel flags with a white bedsheet that his wife had brought on board, narrowly avoiding cannon fire. Smalls, his family, and the entire crew of the Planter were now free.
Chairman, can I have a point of order? There have been a lot of mention of information and testimony that you all have received from whistleblowers. When are you planning on providing that to the minority?
You could have been for the very first deposition, or excuse me, transcribed interview of the whistleblower. I was there when he testified on Tuesday.
Okay, that's fine. I assume you'll turn those over. But what about, you talk about dozens of whistleblowers. When are we going to get that information?
When they testify, when we work with, I'll work with the ranking member on that information.
You don't have any transcriptions of their interviews?
We have the first one, and we have the dozens who come and talk to our office.
They talk to your office privately?
They talk to Republican staff, right.
And they're not transcribed, no notes, no nothing?
The first one happened Tuesday.
No, I'm not talking about the first one.
The first one happened Tuesday, the next one happens tomorrow, the third one happens next Wednesday, and we'll continue to do that.
You just said dozens. Do you have notes from those, or they're just talking to you, your staff?
Mr. Chairman, isn't that how whistleblowers typically work?
Well, it's how they're supposed to work. It's not how they worked in the impeachment that Mr. Goldman was a part of when Mr. Schiff said he didn't have contact with that whistleblower, but in fact
Actually,
he did.
it worked exactly appropriately until
we're doing
Mr.
it the way you're
Trump would
supposed
not
to do it.
allow.
We're doing it the way we're supposed to do it, Mr. Goldman.
No, you're supposed to turn it over to the minority.
When they come and testify, you'll have access to the transcript like everyone on the committee will.
You mean your staff is not going to turn it over to our staff? We're just in the dark?
No, when the transcript is done, you will get the transcript.
I mean of the dozens of whistleblowers you have already talked to that came to talk to your staff.
Yeah, what do you want me to turn over there?
Did you?
Their names?
Notes? Anyone take notes?
I'll be happy to talk with the ranking member on how we handle that information.
Thank you.
All I'm telling you is we will schedule each for a deposition, and we are doing that. You didn't show up for the first one, but you could have been there. But that's
I didn't know about
Sunday,
it.
and welcome back to our second segment. Look at that. Val's making me laugh. We're going to be talking about Social Security, which is not funny, but he told a funny joke. So I'll get myself together and we'll talk about Social Security. But in the break, you saw the story about Robert Smalls. So teach somebody that story if you can. We've talked about this in light of the fact Florida did not want to approve AP African American Studies for high school credit. The only way people are going to know these stories about African Americans is if we retell them. So that's why we're playing them this week. Last week, you saw Fannie Lou Hamer, and you also saw the story of the astronaut Ron McNair, who was a pioneer at NASA A&T connection right there with Ron McNair. But Robert Smalls this week. Hey, Val, it's the other thing that you saw coming back in was some of this nonsense in these congressional committees. And there's supposed to be this one committee, Val, that's supposed to be checking into the how the government has been weaponized. And then there was this other committee where they were supposed to be looking into how Twitter, supposedly suppressed right-wing Republicans. And they got shown the door on both of those issues that people were like, nah, that ain't what happened. Donald Trump is the one who called Twitter and said, people saying ugly stuff about me, take it down, and so on and so forth. What's going to happen in Congress with these kind of people like Paul Gosar and, Jim Jordan leading these committees and Lauren Boebert? Is anything going to happen in this 118th Congress?
That's a great question, Ed, because it gets to the heart of how it happened in the first place and what really can be done about it. And it goes back to gerrymandering. These people are where they are now because gerrymandering has been put on steroids, and it is allowed to affect who the representatives are that sits in the seat of power in Washington. And until we can control that, now I'm specifically talking about the gerrymandering at the state house level, because that's where the decisions are made, what the congressional districts are going to look like. And they decide at that level, and with the sanction of the Supreme Court, who's already ruled on those issues, they decide what the representation is going to be like from that particular state. It's like making a bet on the first tee in a golf match. If you negotiate properly, playing the 18 holes is an afterthought, because it's already been decided what the outcome is going to be if you're a good negotiator on the first tee. And that's what happens with gerrymandering. They decide who's in which district, who and where the precincts are located now. They've already decided the outcome. And now you get all of these people right there in Congress at the same time, with bringing their crazy with them. And it's going to remain that way, Ed, until we can change the big wheel at the top that says gerrymandering is illegal. And you can't do that. And you must have a bipartisan committee or some independent commission to reapportion the districts after the census that happens every 10 years or whatever. We call it redistricting. You've got to go in at that level and change that, or we are going to compete and continue to repeat what we have right now. We don't have a mechanism set up to defeat people like Jordan, to defeat people like Green. It's not set up when the people in the district that they run in is overwhelmingly Republican, overwhelmingly right-wing. The condition has already been decided on the first tee. It might as well not even go to the poll. And that's the problem that we are having in Congress today. Gerrymandering has set up a thing that we have a minority rule. Republicans make up the minority in this country, folks. Republicans make up the minority in many states. They make up the minority in most of the states, but they run and rule most of the states. That's called minority rule. It's not democratic, and it's got to be looked at, and it's got to be changed.
Yeah, that's Val Atkinson, and we're talking about a lot of stuff this morning. The beginning of the discussion was about the congressional committees and how much sway they have in this particular Congress by not doing shit, which they won't get anything done. And the reason why they can do that is, to Val's point, is they've gerrymandered themselves into power. So if you're listening to us on Spotify or Anchor, Google Podcasts, we appreciate it. Make sure you let people know and have them subscribe. But also, you can watch us on YouTube. You can watch us on Facebook and a lot of other platforms as well. So make sure you continue to support us, because Val spends a lot of time studying this stuff, and to have somebody with his background to be able to explain this stuff to you, I think is really important. As you were talking about, it made me think about, what we talked about last week, some of the Supreme Court cases coming up that could kind of undo everything and make it so that state legislatures can decide whatever they want, and there'll be no oversight in choosing these congressional districts. But I did hear a story, and I don't know if you thought about this, but it said that we had already approached the point where there was almost 700,000 people per district, right? Because there can only be 435 people in Congress, and that hasn't been changed, and it's not likely to be changed. So as more people are born, and now we're at 330 million people, that means that the districts are getting more and more packed. And then you got states like Montana or Idaho or whoever, Wyoming, they only get one congressperson because that's all they got. They only got 650,000 people in the whole state. But you got a place like Washington, D.C., who has more people than them, and they're not a state. And you got Puerto Rico that has more people than them. It's not a state. You got Guam that has more people than them and not a state. And I could name a couple of other territories that we have. So one of the things I heard this week, Val, in one of these committees is they were talking about DC and home rule for DC and whether or not they can, decide on things themselves. And I heard these legislators in these committees talking about they didn't like DC's policy on, determining which crimes required jail time or whether or not you could carry weapons in the city. And talk to me real quick, because we both have lived in DC large parts of our life. And the whole notion that DC can't even decide what it wants to do. Why is DC not a state? I know the answer, but I want you to tell everybody why DC is not a state.
DC is not a state because Republicans know when they become a state, there will be 2 more Democratic senators. These 2 senators are likely to be African American. There will be 1 more voting person on the House side. That person is likely to be an African American. And it tilts a lot of the math that they've been using to get their way. There will now be 102 senators. There will now be 436 voting members of the House. And it kind of changed the math a little bit, especially when you come to the 12th Amendment and the Electoral College, because it talks about in there needing the majority of the people in a contentious election. It talks about 270, and you got to change all that math. A lot of things got to be done. They don't want to give up that power. So as long as Republicans hold the type of power, the amount of power that they do, you are very unlikely to see DC become a state, nor Puerto Rico to become a state. That's a Democratic move. That's the primary reason. There are a lot of other crazy stuff that they'll throw out there about carrying guns, about, hey, that's a distraction. It's about power. It's about who the 2 senators will be.
Well, like you said, they're going to look like you or me, and we can't have any more colored people. Now, I know it's not popular for Republicans to go along with that. They can't say it in public because they'll trot out Rick Scott or they'll trot out your the new guy, Byron Donalds, right? Their new favorite Negro.
Yes.
And because this is our show, Val, we can say whatever we want to. I'm telling you that it's okay to be a conservative Black politician because you got to sleep at night. But to know that somebody like Paul Gosar or Lauren Boebert or any of these people don't want DC to become a state because it has Negroes in it, and you know that, and you go to bed at night and you align yourself with those people, well, I hope you sleep well, because I do, because I tell the truth about this, and you just told the truth that this is about not wanting to get not just Democrats more power. They're afraid of Negroes. And it's so funny, Val. I heard something this morning in one of those shows that were talking about, the Super Bowl, but they were just talking about how Black culture has permeated around the world. That when you think about America, you're talking about Black people normally, right? You're talking about LeBron James. You're talking about Michael Jordan. You're talking about Rihanna. You're talking about Cardi B. When you say America to other people, and you talk about how we dress, you talk about how Black people dress or whatever, blah, blah, blah. But we are afraid of having Black people in control. Now, here's the other part of the conversation, though. We also had this conversation yesterday, off camera, off mic, about the reality of Black people are not going to take over and be in control of everything. Number one, it's not enough numbers. It would take many more decades for Black people to outnumber white people. And I don't think that's ever going to happen. I think what you'll see is a browning of America because of people marrying and all those kind of things. But this notion that they're afraid of Black people taking over, goes back to stuff like the Birth of a Nation movie where, it showed Black people running Congress, eating watermelon and fried chicken with no shoes on in Congress. that trope, right? So again, let's talk some reality here, Val. Black people make up about 13% of the population. Hispanic people, 13 to 14, maybe 15. South Asians are coming in, and people from other places, they make up like another, 2 or 3%. So at some point, it's going to be 51% of people who don't identify as white, right? So isn't that the real problem here?
That is the problem. And it became highlighted in 2010 or 2011 when the census data was released. And the prognostication was that in as early as 2045, and some people said 2042, whites would become the minority in this country, that they will be at 49.9% of the population or less at one of those time frames. That scares them, because now they are living in a place and in a time that they may not be able to control, because they have husbanded and accepted the institution of democracy, which means the majority rule. Now, you can't husband democracy and be in favor of white minority rule. It's an oxymoron. You can't do that. That's what scares them. They don't want that. And on the other side, there's a significant number of folks in that community, Ed, who really don't think that people who look like you and I have the wherewithal, the smarts, the intelligence to run a place like the United States of America. So they don't want to give you that chance. They think it's okay for them to go to a place like South Africa, Rhodesia, Australia, New Zealand, and take over and run it. But when it comes to having people of color run it when they are there, that's not, it all boils down to white supremacy. There are too many people in this country and on this planet who really believe in it. Yeah. They really believe in white supremacy, and all these other things that we are talking about is cover for that belief. You talk about laws and you talk about right and wrong and the judicial system and this, that, and the other. It's cover because they don't believe that non-whites are capable of running the show as they have run it for the last 2,000 years.
Yeah, well, I'm tired of them running it. So I do want to give a shout out to a program called Throughline. Throughline can be heard on a lot of NPR stations, but it's also a podcast. And this week, the podcast was about what is white. And Val, in it, they talked about a case from early 1900s where a man had immigrated from India, and he was a Brahmin. So he was from North India and very light skinned, but his citizenship was revoked because at the time, the United States excluded certain people. So they excluded people from Asia, but not Chinese people, Japanese, it didn't matter. If you were from Asia, you could not get citizenship, right? And so the Indian gentleman, Mr. Singh, goes to the Supreme Court, and the court says, no, you can't be a citizen because you just can't. The rule says you can't. That's all there is to it. Mr. Singh, however, argued that inherently white people had an advantage because of where he was from in northern India. He was white. And then there was this whole argument about what is white. And the program is called Throughline for a reason, because the rationale was about Aryan supremacy. And people from northern India are called Aryas, and that's where the word Aryan comes from. And so there had been this myth going on that white people from Europe went to northern India and taught them everything they needed to know. And then they come back, and that's why they're called Aryans, because they settled in Arya, and then they go back to Germany, and everything great about the world was in Germany, right? Well, guess who read that? Adolf Hitler. And guess who started it? It was some American scientists who started this whole notion of this aria, because they had to prove that blacks and Chinese and everybody else were inferior. So this guy named Adolf Hitler reads this stuff, and that's why they used the swastika as a symbol in Germany, because it's an Indian symbol. And what they did is they stole it when they went to India to do research, and they started using it for their own purposes, because they said, oh yeah, this is where we actually are from. And so on and so on. So you see how convoluted all of this is, Val. The reality is, if you do a DNA study on people, we're more closely related than we're not. And that we all came from Africa, whether they want to admit it or not. Right. And so they always try to find these alternate realities. So if you get a chance, listen to Throughline on, you can find it on NPR stations, but you can also just do a search on your favorite podcast platform. Look for Throughline. And this week's episode is about what is white. Val, one last thing before we take a break, real quick. I'm in AARP, so I get my discount. I get the plus 55 rate for my telephone and all that other stuff, right? But I am fast approaching the time when I want to consider what I'm going to do about Social Security and retirement. And real quick, here's Mitch McConnell saying something about the Republicans' real thing about whether or not they want to get rid of Social Security.
So it's clearly the Rick Scott plan. It is not the Republican plan. Social Security and Medicare are not to be touched, and I've said the same. And I think we're in a more authoritative position to state what the position of the party is than any single senator.
McConnell went on to say it was, quote, just a bad idea. As for Rick Scott's reelection in Florida, Mitch McConnell says this plan could make his campaign difficult, especially with the amount of retirement age people living in Florida.
So, Val, Mitch McConnell says that, the head of the Republican Senatorial Committee, Rick Scott, who tried to also challenge him to be leader of the Republicans, should not have said anything about getting rid of Social Security. He said it was a dumb plan and Republicans aren't for getting rid of Social Security. But we know better, don't we? What's the real deal with Republicans and what they think about Social Security or any program like Medicare, any of that stuff?
Well, the Republicans have gotten themselves in a place that they wish they weren't as it relates to Social Security. Social Security was so complicated as far as the average person is concerned that they could get away with this stuff 20, 30 years ago, talking about the disadvantages of Social Security, and everybody would do better going to the private market, and the government would save a lot of money. Now people are a little smarter, and people like Mitch McConnell knows that the percentage of people that rely on Social Security in his state is so high, and people are now smarter, that if he embraced that idea of getting rid of Social Security, they'd vote him out of office. And he understands that, so he's got to say, hey, we're not going to bother with Social Security. This whole thing started as a way to mollify and get the rich on the side of the Republicans, to get those campaign contributions and things, because it's the rich folks who want to get rid of Social Security. They see that as a valuable markets plus to get all of those dollars that go to Social Security and make people bring that money to the marketplace, to Wall Street, and gamble with it. That's all it is. They're going to get. That's what they want. And millionaires will become billionaires overnight. But the other side of that is people who are just getting by will become destitute and impoverished overnight as well. So that's what the Republicans have gotten themselves into. The one answer, and you didn't ask me, but I give it anyway, the one answer and resolution to all this that nobody wants to talk about, and I don't understand why, is the cap that's on Social Security. It's capped at X amount of dollars. People running around saying, well, today's my liberation day. Today I paid the last amount I need to pay into Social Security, so the rest of my income for the rest of the year is mine. What that relates to is that if the cap is 7%, only 7% of your salary can be taxed to go into Social Security. If the cap were off or even adjusted to 20% or 25%, Social Security would be floating in money. You never would have any question about that. But the people with the most money are really protected from paying into Social Security.
Yeah.
And it's people who are just getting by who are paying the Social Security tax.
Right.
That they will get back once they start receiving Social Security, if that's possible. But we've got to make these people pay their fair share. Hell, when there's a war going on, they don't go to the military. They don't send their kids to the military. They don't want to pay into Social Security or Medicare or Medicaid. They want a free ride. And they're the ones with all of the money. Yep. When you give them more money, Ed, they don't buy anything because they got everything that you need to buy with the money. They already got it.
Yeah.
So what do? They take the money to Wall Street and they gamble with it.
And hopefully, from their standpoint, make more.
But if they lose $50 or $60 million, how many heads of lettuce went into accumulating that $50 million that somebody had to pick? How many orchards did somebody have to pick clean to accumulate this $50 million? And he just willy-nilly says, oh, I just lost it. I'll invest over here and I'll get it back some other kind of way. Why are we doing this? I know why, because the people with money and power control the government instead of the government controlling them.
Well, you said a mouthful there, and all of it is absolutely true. Hey, I know we need to take a break, so let's do that. And when we come back, I got 3 more stories I want to talk about. I want to talk about COVID numbers real quick because I got some personal stories about COVID this week that are not good. I want to talk about something called the Super Bowl because that's going on, and then a release of police video here in Raleigh, North Carolina this week. So all of those have to do with colored people. Those stories have a lot to do with colored people, so I want to talk about those. So stay right there. We'll be right back after this.
Be the difference at Elizabeth City State University and discover your strength, ignite your passion, and prepare to make a difference in the world. Nestled in northeastern North Carolina, ECSU is your home away from home, offering a quality and affordable education in a nurturing and supportive environment. Size does matter, and ECSU's small size means that students know their classmates, students receive one-on-one attention from their professors, and students know that the faculty and staff are committed to their academic success. Welcome to ECSU, where your success, safety, and comfort matter. At Elizabeth City State University, students come to discover their passion and leave to conquer their dreams. Whatever your passion is, you can be the difference at ECSU.
Hi, I'm Katie Lawson with the Law Office of Katie Lawson, where the law is in our name. If you need to contact us, please feel free to give us a call at 919-885-4019 or email us at admin@klawsonlaw.com. We're conveniently located at 2144 Page Road, Suite 204 in Durham, North Carolina. Please come and see us.
And welcome back to our third and final segment of The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is Sunday, February 12th, Super Bowl Sunday. We've got a lot to cover in this last segment, so I'm going to go real quick, Val. I'm going to do 2 rapid-fire topics real quick. One, because it just hits kind of close to home. COVID-19 is not over and done with. A former co-worker passed away from COVID this week, and it just made me think. And so I went and looked at the numbers, Val, and they're still not good. Of those states with the lowest vaccination rates, Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, Texas, you go down that list, they tend to be southern states, have the worst death rates. But even North Carolina, out of the southern states, it has the best, along with Virginia, outcomes because we have higher vaccination rates. But one thing that I started to see, Val, was people did not get the booster shot. They haven't gotten it. And there's a lot of people with COVID. And I'll just leave it at that because I don't think there's much else I can say about that. You can see the chart up there with the statistics this week of deaths and also new cases. And it's clear to me that that chart does not look like it's trending in the right direction, Val. The other story that I want to say something about real quick, Val, because we do get consumed a lot with, there's a big national story, and then, Ben Crump shows up, Al Sharpton shows up, like rightly they should have in Memphis after what happened. But in Raleigh, there was a police death, and we talked a little bit about it last week. And they released a video. I won't show the video, but I will talk about the fact is that there is a need for police reform. And I happened to talk this week, Val, to Roger Floyd, who is George Floyd's uncle. And he's been a guest on our other program, Connections, in the past. And he was on with Larry Hall this morning on Talk Back here in the Triangle. And one of the things that's clear to me in talking to him, and like we say here all the time, there has to be some reform of the police. The police have too much power. They just jack people up, and every time there's a dead Black person, it's over a parking situation. It's over a moving violation. It's over a license plate. It's over a out headlight, tail light. Nothing to do with any crime that's been committed. Now, yeah, it's in the statute somewhere that you can't drive around without insurance, but why do you gotta end up dying? Because you had a moving violation. And you can do a lot of this stuff with technology. Send a person a summons to their house. Here's your license plate. We saw it. It's expired. Please explain this. If not, stop driving. And so be it. So I'll leave it at that, Val, because we could talk ad nauseum about both of those topics, COVID and police killings. But I want to switch gears because the biggest day in sports in America is the Super Bowl. It far outstrips everything that's in Major League Baseball. It's been decades since baseball has been important in America. I mean, a lot of people still watch, but not like the Super Bowl. People watch the NBA Finals, but not like the Super Bowl. People watch the Stanley Cup, but not like the Super Bowl. It's on a whole different level. There's a lot of money. And one of the things that's unique about this Super Bowl is there's 2 Black quarterbacks. Now, you go, again, I already mentioned this. It's 2023. And we're still talking about the fact that we just got to the point where there's 2 Black quarterbacks starting in a Super Bowl. And it's a big story. Before we talk about it, Val, I did see a story out of Texas. There's a college in Texas that actually has a museum about Black NFL players. So let's watch that, and then we'll talk about it.
James Harris, when he got his first start. Well, this is our sports room at the East Texas African American Museum. About 2 years ago, I started collecting sports magazines, photos, autograph, as well as newspaper articles concerning the history of the NFL African American quarterback. In my exhibit, there are several articles concerning how difficult it was during a certain era to have the opportunity to start as a quarterback. The first African-American quarterback during the modern era, Marlon Briscoe. This is a picture of him in action. He went through quite a bit being a starting quarterback for the Denver Broncos. He started out as a quarterback, but once he left Denver, they converted him to being a receiver. For many years, there were excuses given to not have a starting Black quarterback. And it is obvious, given the opportunity within this modern era, that Black quarterbacks have been very successful. Doug Williams, with the Washington Redskins, became the first African-American quarterback to win Super Bowl. I also have a second exhibit in this room where it features the African-American NFL coaches. The first African-American coach was Art Shell. during Black History Month, it does give us opportunity to bring forth attention on accomplishments of persons in all fields of life. Realize the struggle, but also realize the sky is the limit. And if it's your dream to be an NFL quarterback or an NFL coach, you should pursue your dreams.
So Val, clearly somebody has put in a lot of effort to find the whole history of Black quarterbacks in the NFL. We're both old enough to remember there being none. And then when there was one, even in an NFL game, even for one game or one quarter of a game, it was a big deal. And it's only been in the last few decades that Doug Williams was the first Black quarterback to win a Super Bowl with the Washington Football Club, now the Commanders. Talk to me, Val, about growing up in, clearly we spent most of our lives where there was no Black quarterbacks in the NFL. What was that like? I mean, did people pay as much attention to the NFL? And then when Blacks started to dominate at the running back position and receiver positions, but there were still no quarterbacks, there was always this thing where they would talk about intelligence of the quarterback. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, well, the general public allowed itself to be convinced by some racist people that the intelligence level required by the position of quarterback was way beyond the grasp and reach of the average Negro, as we were called back during that time. And that Black people were more suited for the positions of running back or wide receiver and maybe a defensive end or something like that. We weren't even considered good enough to play strong safety because you had to think back there. You have to make decisions on the fly. And slowly but surely things went along. I recall as an adolescent watching college football on the black and white TV in the community, which in most cases was only one. And we all would root for the team that had the Black guy on it, because in many cases there was only one Black guy playing on a college football team. So we would say, hey man, this school over here is got a Black football player. I think he's playing DB. He's playing defensive back, and we would do that. And then it became more and more and more. And now we look at it and I understand that 70% plus of the NFL is Black. And there are just way more than a half dozen Black quarterbacks starting in the NFL now. And as you started the segment, there are two in the Super Bowl. Both quarterbacks are Black. So we've come a long way. And we should take all of the challenges and adversities that we went through to get to this point to remember, let's not go this way again. Let's not do that. Let's not let Latinx people have to say, well, we got the first Hispanic guy to do this and that. Let's get to the point that it doesn't matter that the guy playing quarterback last name is Williams or Martinez or Cheklos. It should not matter. Can he play? That should
right.
be.
Yeah, sports is about who the better player is. I on Connections we had the coach from Elizabeth City State University on Val, and he was talking about the difficulties at his level, Division II, when in terms of trying to recruit. Even though there's been a lot of people who have been praising HBCUs, and we all know that Deion Sanders' effect down at Jackson State. He couldn't beat North Carolina Central, by the way, but that's a whole nother story, or South Carolina State for that matter. So he got a lot of shine on HBCU football. However, here's the brass tacks to it, right? You talked about those 70% of the players being Negroes, African Americans, coloreds, whatever we are this week, and there's still coaching vacancies in the NFL. and at the Carolina Panthers, they had an opportunity to keep Steve Wilkes as the coach, but they didn't. Right, he's off to be a defensive coordinator somewhere. And most of the moves that I've seen, Val, so far have been black coaches not getting head coaching positions, but they're recycling people like Sean Payton, white coaches, for these openings and jobs. So let's talk about the NFL from that standpoint, people in the front office, team ownership, coaches, that kind of thing. So you got all these black players, but you still don't have black people in the roles that really make a lot of the decisions, because the honest to God truth is the average lifespan of players, not the Tom Brady's or Lawrence Taylor's and people like that. The most players play 4 years and that's it. Or you're like DeMar Hamlin, who probably will never play again, and he never made more than the minimum salary, right? And he won't get anything unless the team just feels generous enough to give him something. So what's the reality for black coaches, when we get out of that period when we're talking about whether or not a black coach can even coach an NFL team?
Well, we get back now to what the problem really is in corporate America and everywhere else. That guy at the top who's making the decisions lived in a segregated community, maybe even gated community, had no friends that were people of color, didn't understand the culture of people of color, and thought that his next door neighbor with the freckles was the idol of his life. You're going to let a guy like that grow up that never had to work for anything, everything was given to him, and you're going to let him make the decision as to who should be the coach of a team? What kind of decision you think's coming out of that? Segregated communities, segregated schools. All of his neighbors were white, never knew any black people personally. Everything you heard about black people was negative. They're going to jail. They lose jobs. They don't handle the big jobs well. They can't think very well. So now he's got to make a call, because you own the team. You got all the money. You the big boy. You make the decision as to who the next head coach is going to be. Then we get surprised that he chooses somebody that has never coached or played at the professional level, that doesn't have a good winning record, that's been rehashed by several teams. You're saying, why you keep putting these guys in? You know why? Because he reminds him of that freckle-faced next-door neighbor he had some 30, 40 years ago. He reminds him of one of his best friends he used to go fishing with. He reminds him of the guy his uncle used to tell him about would make a good boss if some of the workers could just train him properly. He'll make a good boss one day. Didn't mind to tell you that all the workers were black. So the workers have to tell him what the job is about and how to do it. Then he'll make a good boss, okay? But that's where we live and lie right now. You have one majority black owner in the NBA, Michael Jordan. As we speak right now, I don't believe we have any in the NFL. So all of these decisions that are being made as to who the next coach is going to be for what team are made by white people, and most of them, and all of them are rich, not most of them, all of them are rich, all of them are billionaires, and they don't come up with, they haven't had the same experiences that we have had here. They don't know us. So they make decisions that in many cases are not in our best interest.
Well, I don't think they're going to even try to find out anything about us, as long as we can run that ball, boy. Right. And score a touchdown. Now, so the oddity about that is, well, I watch the sport. You do too. We know who's in the game, right? We know who's playing. And we also have a prediction about who's going to win. And so I'm not putting any real money on this, but I'm putting my money, my fake money, on the Kansas City Chiefs, not because I think they're the better team, but the Super Bowl is a weird game, right? Most of the time, the better team wins, but not all the time. Patrick Mahomes is hurt, but so is Jalen Hurts is hurt. And I after what happened in the Cincinnati Chiefs game, and when your boy Mahomes was playing on one toe and still managed to win the game, I'm going to give my nod to the Kansas City Chiefs as winners of the Super Bowl. Now, Val, all right, go out on a limb. What's your prediction?
All right, here it goes. I'm going to be, first of all, tell you, I'll be pulling for the Eagles because a portion of my wife's family lives in Philadelphia, and she told me I had to pull for the Eagles. However, after having said that, if you make me bet some money, which I am not, but if you force me to bet some money, I'm going to put it on Kansas City. Because if there's such a thing as the football gods, if there's such a thing as a referee making a funny call, if any of that comes into play, Kansas City is going to win this game now, I'm going to tell you. And you can call it fortune, you can call it luck, you can call it whatever you want, but that it factor, Kansas City has it. And I think because they are so closely matched, it's going to come down to that it factor.
Well, so that means, folks, run out, put all your money on the Eagles. Because Val and I said the Chiefs were going to win.
That's right.
But on a serious note, I want to thank folks for spending the hour with us like you normally do. And we keep growing the audience. I keep getting new people coming in saying that they enjoy the program. So, again, Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Facebook, Twitter, you name it. You can find us there and you can get to us. So share that with people, because we put a lot of effort into this. I know it looks effortless on Val's part. He never breaks a sweat, but we actually read a lot and do a lot of studying before we come on here and try to give you information. And we wanted to be informed. Val, like I always do, anything you're working on, anything you want to tell us. I know one thing that happened to you this week. You can tell it if you want to, but anything you want to tell us.
Well, I gotta say a big shout out for my little boys. Many people know and some don't that I've been coaching Parks and Rec in Cary, North Carolina, 13 and 14-year-olds. And of course, at the end of the year, we have a basketball tournament with all of the teams, 20, 30 some teams playing in the tournament. Everybody has a role to play. Everybody gets in. Not like Carolina and Duke may not do this year. But in that tournament, we were the number 3 seed out of 20 teams, and we proceeded to the finals to play against the number 1 seed, who, by the way, was undefeated when we played them, and we came out victorious, 33-32, in spite of the coach. We still won.
I demand an investigation. No, on a serious tip, congratulations, because we did talk about that last week. Not just the coaching part, but why you coach, right? To try to inspire these young folks and also to show, again, that Black men can do stuff other than just play. You can lead a team and you led them to a championship.
Let me say this one thing before you go ahead. Normally, you find a lot of Black coaches going down trying to be good examples to other Black kids to show them this, that, and the other. I look at it that way and also another way. I think more Black men need to show non-Black men that we can do the job, that we can be leaders, that they can develop relationships with us. So that when they go to school and the workplace and other things, they can say, I remember I had a coach when I was playing ball and he really inspired me and he led us and he was competent and he did the right thing. So this is for Black kids, but it's for non-Black kids as well, that Black people get involved and show leadership.
There you go. I think you said it all. Well, go get your wings ready or your pizza, or your potato chips or your crudité platter, whatever you're gonna have for your Super Bowl party. We're gonna try to relax this Sunday and be back again next week for another edition of The Deal. In the meantime, I'll be on Connections next Sunday on Foxy 107, 104 at 8 a.m. But if you ever want to hear a replay, we can make that available too. So have a great Sunday. And in the meantime, do what I always tell you to do. Go out and do something good for somebody today. And we'll see you next week. Bye.